My name is Miss Van, and this is another College for Creative Studies Community Arts Partnership drop-in class. The class I'm teaching today is how to reuse plastic containers such as these that you would get like at takeout places, or just like this was like a soda bottle. So what we're making today are these really cool plastic bangle bracelets that kind of vary in like fun shapes and sizes. So what you will need are some recyclable plastic materials, a utility knife, a pair of scissors, some markers, and a baking tray covered with wax paper. And then also you will need an oven that is preheated to 300 degrees. So the first step is to kind of decide how thick you want your bangle bracelets. The cups that I used for these ones I cut into about 1-inch thick strips, and as you can see they get pretty narrow. So I'm just going to pick a color at random. I'm going to take this pink marker. It's like this fun hot pink color, and just kind of guesstimate little sections on here to cut. And then they do shrink, so I'm going to leave the bottom section of the cup. Not going to use it. And then the rim of the cup I found, because it's usually a little bit sturdier plastic, doesn't shrink as much. So you can leave that thinner. So I'm going to use a different color. I like these metallic colors, and they show up pretty well on the plastic after it sort of melts and reshapes. So I'm going to use this to kind of separate. And then you also will need a small piece of paper towel. I washed this out recently. It had a label on it. I kind of had to scrub it with warm soapy water and some steel wool to get the adhesive off, and you can see it's still got some liquid trapped inside. So once I get this open, I'm going to make sure that I remove all of the moisture from the plastic, or else the markers won't work. So I'm going to get to that next. It's pretty dry on the outside. I'm going to choose this sort of metallic blue and just kind of make little marks on the outside here, just to be my guides to start with. So I'm not going to use this portion of the bottle for this project. You want to be really careful when you use a utility knife. They're really sharp. I like the ones that lock. So this one I got in like a multi-pack at the dollar store, and it has like this little sliding sort of button so that it locks in place, so that it won't retract while you're using it, which is really helpful. So I always like to cut on a sturdy surface and point the sharp end of the blade away from me. And then I like that you can kind of use the blade to make kind of fun, like wavy shapes. To this last like 2 inches or so, I'm going to switch to my scissors. It's really helpful also because it's a lot easier to make the initial cut into your plastic with the utility knife. If you use the scissors, you kind of have to crease it to get a good cut, but you can still do it. So I just kind of cut it in a fun wavy pattern. I'm going to set that off to the side because I'm going to use the paper towel to dry the rest of the water. You don't have to worry too much about the plastic edges, but you don't really want to leave anything too sharp. It does fuse pretty well after you put it in the oven. I'm just going to get in here and dry it out when it's all together. So this is pretty much going to fill up my first baking tray. Just going to kind of judge size. All right, I'm going to cut this one down to got away from me a little bit, so I'm just going to trim. You want to make sure that your bangle bracelets don't touch at this point because they will fuse together in the oven if they are too close. You want to give them at least like a ½ an inch to be separated. This one's getting kind of sorry. This one kind of got away from me, so I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to cut a different one. So now I'm going to pick just a couple of markers and decorate my plastic. This is going to be really, I think this is going to be just about perfect size for me when it's fused. So I'm going to use this sort of metallic turquoise. I'm going to use this hot pink, and I'm going to use gold. I'm just going to make some cool little abstract designs. You don't have to get too detailed at this point because they do really fuse together, and you just get this like really cool swirl pattern when you're done. So like any like excessive detail is going to be pretty much lost in the process. But I am going to just use the same 3 markers on all of my plastic just so that it's matching. So we'll have a nice set. And you can use, like I used the white plastic. This was a Wendy's cup. And you can see, like the Wendy's cup was mostly red. And then there's like a little bit of gold from the marker that I used. And it shows up pretty well. And it also kind of like blends together interesting ways. I'm just gonna use the marker and just kind of connect this band of color. And I'm gonna repeat that on all of my other pieces of plastic. I really like the idea of found object art or upcycled art or repurposed art or whatever you want to call it. You can recycle, and that's a really good way to make use of materials. But for me, it's like super interesting and exciting when you can find ways to repurpose materials that you wouldn't expect to be like a valuable resource into something fun. So I like this piece of plastic because it's got some texture on it. If you've seen any of the other videos that I've done for a cap at home, you'll know that I think texture is like super fun. And it also has a lot of like uses too. Like the texture on the edge of this cup was probably intended so that it would be purposefully slip resistant as you like hold and drink out of it. And it's those little details that I think make objects more interesting. Like somebody designed that cup to work in a very specific way. So I think these colors are going to go really cool together, and like the pattern is going to be really fun. But you don't really have to think too much about it. Like I said, it's pretty much going to fuse together. But you do want to make sure that you're making good thick lines with your marker. I like the Sharpie markers, but any marker will do. I have some highlighters that I've used. I used a highlighter on this one. That green is a highlighter, and it turned out really well. This was actually the lid of like a berry container, and I liked the repetition of like the holes that were used to sort of like vent the moisture for the berries. So while we're working, I'm going to talk a little bit about the oven. You do want it preheated to 300 degrees, and if you forgot, now is a good time to do that. And then you're going to bake your bangle bracelets for about 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be very long. The thinner the plastic, the shorter the time for the baking process. As I've said before, if you watched my video on sun catchers, plastic is like a specific material, but it's also a term used to describe other materials in various states. So I like that there's like a little bit of cohesion from this lesson to the previous one, because you're learning how to take a solid material and transform it. In this case, we're using an oven, and you change its shape. The oven really does create like a really interesting change. You can melt lots of different materials, and then the temperature does make a pretty big difference. Like if you were to use like a lower temperature, it would probably take longer for this process to work. So if you do this project, I would really like to see you comment a photo in the comment section on this post. We also have a YouTube channel that we post our videos on, and an Instagram, and you can find them all under CCS CAP, Community Arts Projects. So you actually type in Community Arts Projects to YouTube, and then I think the Instagram is Community Arts, or CCS Community Arts Detroit. And I'll definitely post those links too in the comment section from this page. I will also follow up with how these look when they're done. So cleanup for this project is pretty simple. All you really need to do is recycle the pieces of plastic that you're not going to use, and then just make sure you throw out the wax paper, because there will be some plastic fused to it. Now, I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure you do use the wax paper for this project if you want to continue to use your baking tray again, because the plastic will permanently fuse to the baking tray if you don't use the wax paper. So that's a pretty key element for this project and a lot of my other projects as well. So yeah, I hope you like this project. Make sure that you're following us on Instagram and YouTube, and that way you can share our projects that you like with some of your friends that may not have Facebook as a social media platform. That's really the project. So that's it. And then you'll bake them in the oven, and you'll get these cool pieces of plastic jewelry that are like super fun to wear. They make great gifts, and I hope you like. I hope you like this project. I'll see you next time.